Hello, everyone. Welcome to Rash's World. Today we have a special guest. We have Blair Dunkley here. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome, Arash.
That's great. Great to hear. So, you won't be saved from this question. Yeah, there's no exception. I'd like you to briefly introduce yourself in any way you see fit, and I do it to everyone here.
Nowhere, no problem. I was going to say no way, just to tease you, but anyway, I thought better of that. Sure. Hey, I am Blair Dunkley. I have a podcast, actually and a YouTube channel called the Blair Dunkley Experience. And what I do is I also am the creator of mind models. And for over 40 years, I've been researching and testing and developing a group of thought frameworks called mind models. I used to be interested, I was trained up as a young man over 40 years ago. Well, way over 40 years ago, but that's giving away hints at my age. Anyway, um, I was trained up in mindset. And I was one of the founders of Life Skills Colleges. And that ran for 35 years. When I was working at Life Skills Colleges, it was based on research done by the Government of Canada, where they defined 362 core competencies that people need to cope and problem solve. The funding ran out and it actually stopped a little bit early by the government of Canada, although that was, $42 million and 5 years of research. I actually continued on at the college and did research in the area of life skills, which morphed into what became mind models later. And that is what I've been doing and working with. Now, I've taken those mind models and turned it into a coaching business where I worked with high-end clients, and I was charging $10,500 a day for my time, and generally getting year-long, 1 day a month contracts. But I wanted to get back to my roots, and my roots were helping individuals because very few people can afford me, and I was just making, in short, rich people richer.
Mhm.
Although I did help, and I have helped quite a few people who are not millionaires to become millionaires. In fact, one of my people I saw, I also do a thing called profiling, and I'll give you some links here on this so that if people want to be profiled by me, and what I do with that is I listen to people for 3 to 5 minutes. Generally, all I need, honestly, is 10 to 30 seconds, but it's got to be sort of random conversation and about multiple areas of their life. And I can then profile them and tell them all about themselves, tell them their strengths, their gaps, and how they can make shifts if it's in business, if it's in a relationship, if it's with themselves, if it's getting themselves out of anxiety and whatnot. Because I also have a program that I'm doing and where I'm training phobia fixers as well. So I've was introduced to a thing over 30 years ago now where a person could I can quite literally teach people um, on and train them on overcoming their phobias. And I want to train up coaches to actually help them overcome, like help them get out there and get people who have fears, phobias, and anxieties to overcome them. So if you're a coach or wanting to get into the coaching business and you're looking for sort of a niche market of phobia fixing, I'm developing a program called the Phobia Freedom Formula. I'll developed it, and I'm just about ready to launch that and start training coaches. I've already had one graduate in that. But anyway, I've done a lot of things over the last few decades, like quite a few decades, like 40 plus decades of being in business. So, um, president of Life Skills Colleges. creator and founder of Mind Models, developer of profiling, language-based profiling system that I shared, developed a thing called IBC, Igniting the Buying Conversation, which I'm about to do a program in on August 1st. I'll give you another link for that if you don't mind.
Mhm.
And quite a few other things, actually. But all of this is based around my research around mind models and question concepts, which literally I listen to people and how they speak. And the mind models was a huge chunk of research that I started doing back in 1976, all the way back there.
And that's what I want to get to, the mind model experience, as well the Blair Dunkley experience itself, with your
Absolutely.
vast experience that you have, or what is that like,
Yep.
and then the mind model approach that you have, and we can then also delve into that. And I think that's a fascinating discussion here. But first up, what's the experience like to have the Blair Dunkley experience?
Well, I actually was doing some marketing today, market research back to the people that are actually taking it. And I asked them, what is their experience of the Blair Dunkley experience? I haven't gotten anything back, but one of the key things that I found way back in preparing for IBC was a bit of what mind models are and what they are not. And so the whole piece that I got into was mind models are a collection of extensively tested thought frameworks and behaviors that enable people to intentionally transform their lives.
Yes.
In other words, get to take control of your lives and make changes. Mind models are kind of like a magnifying glass that lets you easily focus on what it is that's working for you, what's not working for you, and change almost immediately. So it's different than other things out there. Mind models are tools that help you build your future right now. Now, mind models are not another disguised form of mindset. That's just not what mind models are.
Yeah.
Mind models are not mindset in any way, shape, or form. Mindset is based on beliefs. Mindset is only internally verifiable. They may make you feel good. Your mindset may make you feel good and feel like you've changed. While nothing in your world has actually happened except your state, you feel better. Mindset are not identifiable, repeatable, or duplicatable. And they're sort of hit or miss. All mind models are much more than a state of mind. All mind models are behavior-based, and they work whether or not you believe in them or not. Mind models are externally verifiable. They produce real-world results that are observable by yourself and others. When you learn mind models, you can learn to choose your emotions, believe it or not, you can. And the state of being, whether or not it's happy, sad, whatever it is, everything. Because mind models are identifiable, which means that they are named and labeled. They are repeatable. You can use them over and over again and get similar results in every situation. And duplicatable. In other words, you can transfer them from one person to another person. And it's done most effectively by role play. And again, you get similar results. So mind models put the power and control in your hands like nothing else can.
And that's very important because often we feel a victim of circumstances, or we feel that we can't change things, or we feel stuck, and that's very common. A lot of people feel stuck, whether it's in a relationship,
Huge.
in a job, or in their life. And so, one thing that I find interesting is here your difference between making a decision and a choice, the difference between decision and
Absolutely.
choice. And what is the difference here? What would you say, and which one would you prefer? Obviously, I know the answer to this one.
Well, that's good. Um, Most people think because, well, in the program Igniting the Buying Conversation, or IBC,
Mhm,
I'll probably refer to it as IBC.
mhm,
So, Igniting the Buying Conversation, traditional sales has been designed around getting your prospect to make a decision.
mhm,
Prospects have gotten a lot smarter. So, traditional selling models generally require people to make a decision.
mhm.
And they say, so what have you decided? What's your decision? IBC is a conversation. It is igniting, starting a buying conversation with somebody. And it is a conversation. So at the end of the day, in a general conversation, are you generally forced into making a decision? Arash, are you generally forced into making a decision in most conversations? Or is it a choice?
Mhm. The choice would be very limited, and there's often pressure. Like you have sometimes also deadlines to make a decision, and the answer is either do you accept it or not. It's yes or no, kind of, and it's
Correct.
not having another option that you can look at.
Correct. But do you like having options?
Of course. Well,
So
it
can you
depends, though. I mean, sometimes it's hard to decide when you have various options. That makes
exactly,
the
but
decision
is
worse.
it hard to make a choice? Is it harder to make a decision or is it harder to make a choice?
Yeah, there's more pressure with decisions.
Correct.
Mhm,
So what happens is when you have a conversation that is a buying conversation and you guide people through the format of that conversation so that people can actually choose,
mhm.
and they do literally make a choice. It's not a fancy way of calling it a decision. It's quite literally a choice, because when you choose, you are in control.
Mhm.
When you're making a decision, you have to fit into somebody else's mold.
That's right. Yeah.
And so it's making a clear choice, because people today want clarity. They want to get clear in their mind. They don't want to be pressured into making a decision. They've got so much information between their ears. They want to find a way to filter it out, to get it so that it's clearer, it's more practical, it fits their situation and their model of the world.
Mhm.
And
The
so
prob-
that's
The
go
problem
ahead.
with decisions too is once we make a decision, we may regret it, or we might think, "Oh, the other decision would have been better," or not a decision, not making a decision, it would have been better. But we don't really know because there's no like alternate reality where we can try out this and then making a decision and not making a decision. So we have to at one point take a path, right? And
Yeah,
again,
but
accept what's happening there.
sort of. That's sort of true if you're that's 100% true if you're tracking down just the decision.
Mhm,
But if you're guiding and being guided through a process of gaining clarity,
mhm, mhm,
so can I ask you a couple questions around this?
mhm, for sure.
Okay, great. So, um, when you're making a decision, do you feel like you necessarily have all the information you need, or are you feeling pressured into making a decision where you don't have all the information you feel you might need? Which is true.
Most of the time that would be the case unless I've done research and I know about that decision, so it's a very informed decision, but most of the time I'm lacking information. But I think that's why it's so
Exactly.
important to have other options too, and saying this is not the only path, there are other paths that I can choose from, but am I choosing this path and saying yes to it? And I think that's maybe mindfulness can help us to realize this is not the only option out there. I do have control, at least to a certain extent, over choosing perhaps a different path if this does not feel right. And I'm often guided by
Mhm.
intuition. If it doesn't feel right, then I got to be careful with that.
Exactly. Would you like a way of firming up your intuition?
Of course.
Okay. So I have a set of mind models that are called the three E's.
Mhm.
And I'll give a link to you so you can post that and your viewers can get their hands on the three E's.
Mhm.
But the three E's are three mind models. The first mind model is effective versus ineffective. So I'm going to just ask you a question around that.
Mhm.
Is your making a decision generally effective or generally ineffective for you in a sales scenario where you don't have all the information?
In a sales scenario, I would not know much. So mostly ineffective, probably.
Right. Now, do you feel pressured in that situation to make a decision in spite of the fact that you may not have all the information?
There is the pressure, but again, would be my choice if I give in to that pressure or not.
Correct. It's your choice. But if you didn't know the difference between choice and decision,
I'd probably
and
go along if I
the
did know.
salesperson is saying, you need to make a decision here.
Yeah.
Okay. Most people generally want to comply, and most people feel like they get pressured into it.
Mhm. Mhm.
But in the old sales model of using pressure like that, um, we thought we should obey.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there's a ton of psychological pressure,
Mhm.
especially post Second World War,
Mhm.
where authority was huge and we needed to like get into lockstep
Mhm.
and join. And being rebellious was not a common thing. We wanted to align with where everybody else was going. So there was not only pressure from the salesperson, but there could be peer pressure because somebody else bought it, but you don't know whether or not that's exactly what you need or not, but you'll go along with it just because.
Mhm. That's
But
also the
the
idea
just
of
be
authority, though. I mean, when they're selling something, probably don't
absolutely
see it as authority. But if my doctor says something, then it's more likely I see them as a type of authority. So it also the
exactly
context would change in that situation, right?
so true, so true. So, but if you have a choice and somebody asks you, do you have all the information you need to make a good decision here for yourself?
Mhm.
Then you can say yes or no.
Mhm. Yeah.
But if you eventually get around to saying, yes, you've got all of the information you need, and then you can say, depending on what you're selling, well, take it out for a test drive, see if
Mhm.
it works for you first,
Or
and
sleep on
then
it. We
we'll
have that
follow up.
expression too. Sleep on something, right? Don't decide on the
Yeah,
spur of the
just
moment. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Go home, think about it, and
Mhm.
we'll see what happens. It's your choice.
Mhm. That's it.
And people go, oh, really? Yeah. Does this fit your need?
Mhm.
Do you need, in this case, IBC? Do you need more sales
Mhm.
with less pressure where you don't feel like a greasy salesman, or a used cars salesman? You just are having conversations and people say, no, 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 I'm interested in buying this right now. And they say, well, so how much does this cost? And you can give them the price at that time. And the only two objections that people have is, does it cost too much? In other words, do they have the money
Mhm.
or do they have the time? Those are the only two
That's right.
fundamental objections you get when people choose.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point philosophically too, because we have a choice to give into the pressure or not, and often we don't realize that. But then we blame the
Bingo.
other. It's like, oh, well, he convinced me. It's like it wasn't me, and that's again, studies have shown that too. When we just blame the other person instead of actually accepting responsibility for our choice, which we didn't see in the first place.
Well, okay, I want to take you up on that a little bit
Mhm.
because have you ever shopped at Costco?
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay. How many times do you return things to Costco?
very rarely.
Very rarely.
Mhm.
You know what? Costco is based on a choice model.
Mhm.
It sits there on the shelf. You take it, you choose to take it off. Nobody's talking you into it.
Mhm.
And you go there in order to buy something,
Mhm.
not to be sold,
Mhm.
but to buy something.
Mhm.
And there's new kinds of people, like back in the day, go back 10, 20 years, and you had people that wanted to be sold.
Mhm.
A much higher percentage of people wanted to be sold. Now you have less than 1% of the population that wants to be sold. But the percentage of people who like to love to buy. So do you like or love buying stuff?
I'm sure when I can, and depends
Yeah,
on the
when you
stuff I buy.
can.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. Well, when I've done that survey repeatedly, it's now it's at and always has been at for the last 35 years that I've done that survey.
Mhm.
It's always around 1% um, of the audience likes, like, in other words, 99% of the people out there like or love to buy.
Mhm.
1% of the people don't. They just like saving.
Mhm.
That's it. They don't want to spend money. But that's only approximately 1%.
Mhm. Right.
So
Mhm.
knowing how to do that and helping people evaluate
Mhm.
rather than being pressured into a judgment, and you start seeing the strength, like basically, if you could make more money, close more sales by causing your prospects to evaluate,
Mhm.
not to judge, but to see and not to feel pressured into making a decision, but to make a choice. Do you think people would make choices and
That reminds me a lot
make
of
purchases?
mindfulness, of being mindful of again the
Absolutely.
options we have, the choices we have, and again of seeing not being driven by judgment, but evaluating, and it's a much more positive aspect that is more open. Whereas judgment to me
Exactly.
seems very limited and often false in its narrowness, right? And I think with
Exactly.
that, with mindfulness, you have, okay, I have several options. I could choose this, I can react in this way, I can do this. And I think that's something that, again, we need to connect with more.
So, may I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
What is mindfulness? What are the behaviors? How do you be mindful?
Mm-hmm. Well, it comes with awareness of being aware of, your feelings, your
How
responses,
do
and so
you
on.
become aware?
Focus. It's a matter of
How do you gain focus?
that's through practice.
But how
Mm-hmm.
is focus built?
How is focus built?
Yeah, how do you build focus?
Um,
What's the behavior of focus?
of again letting the emotion, it's kind of like meditation in that sense. I see it deeper than meditation, I see it more broader, but meditation is a practice that can help you to focus, and that can then lead you towards mindfulness.
Yeah, but did you notice that all your language was hedging around it's always something else?
Hmm.
Now, I have no problem with mindfulness,
Mhm.
but when you have a mind model, well, actually, a stack of mind model like the three E's,
Mhm.
where you have effective versus ineffective, externally verifiable versus internally verifiable, and evaluation versus judgment, that leaves you with the result when you go through the three E's of it,
Mhm.
which is it effective for me? And you go, yes, this is
Mhm.
effective,
Mhm.
because you can run a real world test and you ask yourself, is this effective or ineffective? And whatever it is that you're doing, you go, this is effective. Okay. Now, is it externally verifiable? In other words, can I videotape myself doing it, or can I record myself doing it, or can I have a third party observe me and tell me what it is that I'm doing with? And can we agree that it's similar, if not the same?
Mhm.
That is externally verifiable. Whereas your argument for mindfulness was generally only internally verifiable.
And that makes sense, because that's the only point that I don't fully agree with, because what do you mean by external and internal? So for me, something that feels right is internal, and to me that's the evidence I need, and that's my intuition. And it might
Yeah,
not be externally verifiable, but I don't care, because that's not the point in that situation. So it's only the
well,
second point where I am not completely sure, and hence my mindfulness is
do
really
you want to
internally focused.
improve? Do you want to improve
Improve what?
your life?
Uh, that depends again, because then when you're looking for something, that means my life is not fine. And that could be a perception where I believe my perception is wrong or faulty, because it's based on something I see only the lack. I don't see what I have. And so that gets driven
Absolutely
by.
true.
Mhm,
But when you look at what you have,
mhm.
everything that you have is externally verifiable, is it not?
Well, possessions, if you talk about that. But
Yeah,
again,
but
that,
even
yeah,
emotions, if you're happy, is that not externally verifiable?
it could be. Others could
Well,
see
if
that
you
because then
smile,
I
is that
feel
not like if
sure.
you smile, right?
Sure.
If
If it's
you,
authentic, again, other people might pretend to be, and they're not, right?
well,
So,
yeah, but you know yourself.
of course, and that's why I
And
think
if
the
you,
internal part is more important. It will project into the outside world. I do agree with that.
exactly,
Yeah.
but the whole thing of internal versus external is like the whole thing with feelings.
Mhm.
Feelings are both internally verifiable and externally verifiable. If somebody is happy internally,
Mhm.
do they not behave in a happy manner?
Yeah.
Right. If somebody is sad internally, do they not portray sadness externally?
Well, yeah, they're all connected. They're interconnected.
Exactly.
Mhm.
But when you're talking about just a pure belief
Mhm.
that is there, you can talk yourself into things. And I've worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of people with depression, and they talk themselves into the fact that they can't change
Yeah.
their state.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you get them to take a look at their state
Mhm.
of depression, which is only internally verifiable, except that they also look,
Mhm. Right. Of
the
course.
cause of it is internally verifiable, because you ask them about things that they like or have done well or done effectively.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden they start noticing those things. Then all of a sudden they're slightly less depressed
Mhm.
because they've done something that has been effective. And they look at themselves and go, hey, hold it. I'm supposed to be depressed here, yet I'm not feeling as depressed or as sad. In fact, I worked with this lady. I had 12 appointments with her and coached her 12 times inside of 4 months. And she had been in a depressed state for in excess of 10 years and had seen counselors and psychiatrists and was on medication and psychologists and lots of talk therapy. And unfortunately, she didn't know how to break out of that pattern. Now, no, it's sort of based on what psychologists are taught and the belief pattern that they've formed, that the way that they interact is the way they should. But what if there was an alternative model that put the power in your own hands to basically, you know, make a discernment whether or not what you're doing is effective or ineffective? Is being depressed effective
And often
for
we're
you?
not encouraged to do that. Often
Well, you're not
we're
at all.
discouraged. We're actually
Bingo.
should follow a regimen, or we should follow the medication, or take this and do that. But it's again, once the locus of control, which is, in my view, often one of the major issues with the depression, is
Bingo.
you
I
don't
am
feel in control. right?
That's right. You don't feel in control, and you are discouraged from being in control because that means you don't need their services anymore.
That is true too. Yeah.
And it's all around money. And at Life Skills,
Exactly.
we had 80% at Life Skills College, 80% of our student population was referred to us because the counselors, the psychologists, the psychiatrists, the social workers couldn't work with these people.
Mhm.
And so we got the worst of the worst.
Mhm.
And yet we were over that 35-year period. Actually, we did a 10-year study, a 10-year longitudinal study that ran for 3 years on each of these people that had been off or on welfare and stuck where they are for years, if not generations. And we were able to move 76 or 72.6% of those people off welfare into a job and maintaining that job for 3 years or more.
Mhm. And
Because
the proof is in the pudding, and that's when
exactly,
you can really show that. And again, that's when again I would fully agree, where you have the internal and it's matching with the external, and you are fulfilling yourself, you are living your potential, yeah, going past your potential as well.
exactly. And so there is this thing called congruency.
Mhm.
When you can match
Yes.
your internal state with your external state,
Yeah.
and it is effective for you,
Mhm.
you're going to be able to stop judging yourself. And how many people judge themselves almost to death? You know, they just beat
Constantly.
up on themselves and they just judge themselves as this is how they are. And it
And they don't
turns
even
out,
realize that they're judging themselves. It's
no,
such
they
like
don't.
such a habit that it just becomes ingrained, right? Fully.
Exactly. And so they learn how to evaluate and
Mm.
they learn how to chunk it down into small steps so that the mindfulness piece that you're talking about, or
Mhm.
that turns into awareness or comes from
Mhm.
awareness,
Mhm.
that's fine. If you don't have any other place to start, well, better start there than nothing. It's a lot better than nothing. But if you have that and mind models where you can start going, is what I'm doing effective for me? Then you ask yourself, what do I feel is effective? And I go, well, I need to feel happy. I need to be able to get myself out of the house and go out to the store and walk around or meet people or go out and see my family rather than being trapped in my place.
Mhm.
And I need to present myself in a way that other people around me like who I am. So they want to be around me and I want to be around them because we're all social beings.
Yeah, but that's the thing with happiness too, because when you say I need to feel happy, then there's this pressure, and when you're not happy, you feel angry with yourself, and it's just creating this dilemma. Whereas, like, I think I'm okay if I'm not happy, and that's fine. Occasionally, I might. If it's constant, that's an issue. But if I have a day off,
Exactly.
that's fine. And actually accepting that, it's like no big deal because I was like I see it as going online and offline for me. And when I'm online, I'm just like satisfied. It's more than happy. It's deep, it's bliss even at times. And sometimes I'm offline and I said, okay, well, I try to go on there, but again, no rush because that would create pressure within. And it's not necessarily good when you then again judge yourself for being unhappy. And then you get into that vicious cycle again.
Yes. But again, what would happen if you made things that you discovered your things that you could identify, repeat, and duplicate, which all mind models are
Mhm, mhm,
identifiable,
mhm,
repeatable, and
mhm.
duplicatable. But you can discover your own set of skills and behaviors that you go, this stuff makes me happy. But
Oh yeah, for sure. But not
hey, you
always.
know,
But that's the thing, though. It usually does. There might be like occasions where it doesn't.
um, okay, then what's the variables that caused it to not make you happy this time?
Probably internal state.
It probably is. Therefore, you can now choose your internal state. What happens when you know how to describe your feelings effectively? and you perceive that you are not subject to your feelings, but you have choice over feelings. Because you have more than
Well,
one
I'm
feeling
not
at
sure
any
I
one
have
time.
choice over feelings, though, and this is why I slightly disagree. But I do have a choice of how I react to things because I don't think we have that much control in life. So it's really the stoic kind of, but not just the negative form of stoicism, but the stoic response to, okay, this is what happens, and I have to choose to feel sad about it or not. I have to choose to be angry about it or not. But I don't choose that event. I'm not in control of various things that happen around me.
No, you're not in control of the event,
Mhm.
but you are in control of how you react to it, as you
Absolutely,
said.
100%.
But it's the long-term reaction that creates depression,
Yes.
that creates anxiety,
Yes.
that creates phobic
Yes.
responses.
Yeah.
So those we are in control of, but we still don't believe we are in control because we
Yeah.
weren't in control of the very first thing. Therefore, the subsequent things were out of control
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
but they're not
Yeah.
because we
Sure.
don't think we can do it. But did you ever check it out? Did you ever test it out?
Mhm.
Did you ever define it?
Mhm.
Probably not.
Mhm.
That's what I spent 17 and a half years at Life Skills College researching and testing and finding specific ways that when people choose to look at their life,
Yeah.
they can use a mind model to choose. Literally, it's called describing feelings.
Mhm.
They describe their feeling, and there is solid evidence that between acting out feelings and naming and labeling your feelings and describing them create a difference in your perception of your own feelings.
Mhm.
Because I used to deal with people from prisons and they came in with anger management issues. Most of those people with anger management issues could not describe their feelings. They just go blankety blank blank. I'm effing this angry and you did this to me, and they don't feel like they can control this. It's always stuff done to them. Well, what if you were given a choice of seeing how you could manage yourself differently to change your condition of how you are?
Mhm. Yeah.
And these are all the
And
things that mind models do.
this is evidence-based because you're looking at neuroscience, you're looking at the brain, the way the brain functions. And let's mention this a little bit so our viewers and audience knows about that.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day here, we've been talking in a way that it becomes what fires together,
Mhm.
wires together.
Yeah.
That is well-established neuroscience. So if you have a way of formulating a way to wire your brain together, to look at it differently, you can physiologically create a different condition. In other words, like I do my phobia and fear thing.
Mhm.
And in generally less than 40 minutes, I can take people with severe phobias. And so long as they're relatively simple phobias, I can walk them through a process that scrambles the neural pathway, not scrambles like turning your brain to mush, but
Yeah, yeah.
changes
Right.
the neural pathways, overlays other ones on so that they aren't forced into
Yeah.
feeling terrorized.
Mhm. And this is the thing, though. The argument against that is people, I've always done this. We've always done it this way. And it's like, no, it's
Perfect.
time to break out of the rut because it's not effective, as you're saying, and try
Exactly.
something else. But that's a comfort zone. And that's the fear of trying to change that. That's the fear of what will happen if I do things differently. And I think that always often we carry around with us too.
Absolutely. But then you have to counter that with what I like to, like I've dealt with people who had horrible fears of flying.
Mm.
And their life, they cannot go on family holidays
Mhm.
because they're terrified of flying. They won't go on business trips, so they've limited their income because they're terrified of flying.
Mhm.
So in less than 45 minutes, I've guided them through a process of how to do that, how to literally, they recall all the things that they were terrorized by in the past, but all of a sudden what happens is they start looking at their life differently because they do not have the triggering behavior, the thing that they had the phobia around, connected to the emotional outcome. And all of a sudden, they recall that terrorizing feeling, but the feeling of terror is no longer there, or the feeling of being claustrophobic, being squeezed in is no longer there. The terror of having a needle stuck in your arm, needing many people to hold you down, or can't climb a ladder past the first step in some cases because their fear of heights.
That's something
Or
for me.
me,
Yeah, that's something for me with self-analysis has helped. I've really, like, in terms of psychoanalysis, taking those tests and seeing what is this causing this? What's the root cause of this fear? And once you deal with that, the fear does go away because you don't have the same response anymore. You feel liberated. And I think that's, like, apart from mindfulness, that's something that I practice too. So it's not just mindfulness. Yes, I agree, has can have its limitations, but it's more
right.
that kind of clearing the path and going through the past and finding out what triggered something. And once you release that, a lot of fears do vanish, and it's amazing how that happens. But I want to go to internal and external verifiable, because
Okay,
that's
let's
that's
do it.
still like that's still on my mind. What about the existence of divinity, of a god? Because I find that is really internal. It's really hard, unless, I could perform a miracle, that I can't prove that. And so, what would you say about that? Or would you dismiss that, which then I would find a bit
No,
troubling?
no.
Yeah.
Um,
How do you deal with that? Because there's a certainty that is there, but you cannot communicate. And that's what I like about Zen as well, where they say, like, in Zen Buddhism, you cannot speak the truth. In Taoism, you cannot say it, because once you do, then it's not the truth anymore. And that
correct.
actually is a problem, because the two don't match. There's no congruency there.
Yeah, but it's testable. So you can go through life. And one of the things that faith gives people usually is peace.
Yes. And that's been proven.
And
We have the evidence to prove that. It's scientifically proven.
bingo.
There
Thank
you
you.
go.
Because
So,
you took the argument
all
right
right.
out of my mouth.
There you go.
So I
Okay.
go, I'm sorry, I can't accept your argument here that you're throwing at me that it's only internal. I'm sorry, it's externally verifiable
Okay.
too.
Okay.
And I don't care if it's a belief or not,
Okay.
but that belief and that faith that you have
Mhm.
gives you a sense of calm, of peace.
And when it
And when
doesn't,
you
then you
have
would
that
say
peace,
it's not working, right? So when my it's aggression, when I have this belief but it leads to aggression towards others, then you say it's not verifiable.
no, it
Okay,
it
I agree with that, actually. Yeah.
well, because at the end of the day, if you get aggressive towards that, who's causing that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, who is? No, answer that. Who's causing the
It's
aggression?
myself, right? It's the person
Right,
that's causing it. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you open yourself up and you start evaluating yourself,
Mhm.
see, you can take it from a judgment point of view and become judgmental, and you can get really pissed off at yourself because you're constantly judging yourself.
Mhm.
But if you find that, okay, in neuroscience, they've studied people in prayer. And one of the things that prayer does for people is it calms them down. And they found that the brain waves in their head shift. They get a visible calmness about them that they can literally manage themselves. I don't care if you're using prayer or if you're using, was that effective or ineffective? And you go, well, that was ineffective. What might I do that's effective? I pray for calmness. Great. So can you ask yourself, was that effective or ineffective? And if the calmness is getting to you, it's calming you down, then I go that, it's observable that that's effective,
Yeah.
and that is externally verifiable.
Yeah, but I think my issue too is, and it's not, your concept is wonderful, but the issue is that people would present themselves in one way when in reality they're very different and they're not being authentic. And that is my concern, because they would say, oh, I'm a peaceful person, but inside they're not. And this is where I have an
How
issue.
do you know that inside they're not?
They're not.
How do you know?
I do know. That's intuition. I do know they're not.
Okay, actually, I would argue, and back in the day when I was teaching, I'm trained up as a master trainer of life skills coaches. That intuition, we get people to actually observe as behaviors. And what we would do is I had a high-end video camera, and I would take a video of people having talking. And as they talked, I could press the pause button. Basically, the video would keep going, but I'd get a still frame of their face. And then I'd be able to release that and get another still frame, press it again, a minute or so later, and get another one. And what is happening is your
Sorry, I can't hear you.
sorry,
Yeah, no problem.
I tapped the
Can
top
you
of
repeat?
this.
That's
Sorry.
okay. No problem.
So basically, on their face, their capillaries are flushing in some areas, in other areas tightening up, and they'll do that in an identifiable pattern. In other words, we have these facial expressions that are micro expressions that we don't get at a conscious level.
Yes, of course. Yeah, yeah. And that's how you can also test if the person is telling you the truth or not. And so I find
Correct.
that quite fascinating. But
But we know this at a subconscious level too.
yes.
And so we get that and we call that our intuition. When you're trained in it, it's no
Yeah.
longer fully
Yeah.
intuitive.
And it's
I know that there's intuition way beyond that
yeah,
too.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
what you just described
Yeah, yeah.
there,
Yeah. But again, there is intuition and intuition. That's something, again,
that's right.
it's hard to do. And there is one that I'm talking about, and this is like, again, deep, profound, that I know things and things have proven correct. And it's like, it's rare to have that access, right?
Yes.
And so I know science does not prove it. And they say, well, don't trust your gut feeling because this and this. And they've done research on this where it's kind of sometimes even discredited. But it's not, it's kind of confusing, because then which are we talking about? And when people talk about the gut feeling, it's not necessarily that intuition. It's just their response. And it might be a response of fear, or again, being triggered
Correct.
something. And that adds to the confusion. But what I'm talking about is deep knowing, which is rare. But when it is there, I do know, right? And so it won't be. I don't think science can do anything about that in that sense.
Well, I would the
Disagree.
deep knowing part,
Yeah.
my profiling
Uh-huh.
is I can listen to somebody speak for, a few minutes, let's say,
Yeah.
and then talk for 20 to 30 minutes usually
Mhm.
on elements of their life that they did not talk about.
Of course.
And I try to go for an 8 out of 10. I usually get an 8, 9, or 10 out of 10.
Mhm.
I generally apologize when I get 9 out of 10 because it's too accurate. I'm not meaning to be overly accurate because that freaks people out.
Mhm.
But there are patterns, speech patterns, language patterns that show me how people think. And I'm
Yes,
teaching
of
this
course.
to other people.
Of
And
course.
that's one of the things that I teach in IBC.
Mhm.
And in the phobia freedom formula, I use the results of that to help people change their pattern, do pattern interrupts
Mhm.
so that they can actually stop the association because they have a language pattern and a thought pattern that is triggering their phobic or anxiety or fear response.
And it's really like language is so important. We don't realize word choices and so on, because they do reflect
Huge.
often our own patterns of thinking, as you're saying.
Well, I would want to beg to differ slightly with that.
Mhm.
Most often, I'm saying 100% of the time, your meanings of your words are how you behave. So the words you choose, even if they're in error, you will behave to those meanings, not to your meant, like what I meant to say was, and you correct yourself and you go, oh, yes, that's what I meant to say. That's correct. You didn't mean to say that, but what you said was this. And that formed a belief structure or came from a belief structure that is probably also there.
Yeah, but it's also the internal. I'm talking about like
Bingo.
internally, the our way of thinking, and there's certain things that words that we use, then they shape a certain belief. I agree with that, and often
Bingo.
a
They
mistaken
do.
belief or a negative belief, and we get drawn into that
Absolutely true.
negativity. So that when we can consciously perhaps change some of that thinking, the negative self-talk that again we constantly
Yes.
criticize ourselves. Once we can first realize that and then try to adjust it slowly without, again, I don't believe in affirmations necessarily because I think that's
Neither
kind of
do I.
surface level. But I think once we can get to the deeper structure of it and then slowly change it from the bottom up, I think that can really help.
Exactly. And that's what I spent
Mhm.
17 and a half years researching
Yeah.
and going, so what are those things? It's all done with words
Mhm.
because words are a form of behavior,
Mhm.
and because those words have meanings, shared meanings, and we behave according to those meanings.
Mhm.
Well, when we're beating ourselves up by self-judgment,
Mhm.
if we interrupt that thought pattern with asking yourself a simple question of, was that effective or is that effective?
Mhm.
That interrupt right there gives you a chance to reformulate your pathway, like rewire your mind.
Mhm.
And that's what, I do is I connect people with the skills and behaviors to help them rewire their mind.
Mhm.
That's how come my company is called Rewiring the
Exactly. So
Mind.
you're the entrepreneur and CEO of Rewiring the Mind.
I
I
am.
want to mention also that you have a book, The Ultimate Mind Hacking, 16 Highly Effective Ways to Smash Unhealthy Mindsets. We did talk about them. There we go. We did talk about them. We did discuss some of them. And there's so much more for our audience to explore, to find out. And I hope this got them interested. One thing I can say for sure that this was a very effective conversation, an effective podcast,
Thank
and
you.
such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much, Blair
Likewise.
Dunkley, for being on Rash's World.
Thank you.